In this section, we are going to work on the self-awareness phase. That is the moment of this treatment in which we bring to light what you learned from all this bad experience that you had to live. And there's the explanation why I tell you that it is not good for you to forget everything that made you suffer, since even from that bad experience, from that pain that caused you so much inconvenience, we can extract some kind of profit. For example, if you had a relationship in which your counterpart hurt you a lot, if we do this self awareness process, you will have a lot of clarity about what you should do in your next relationship so that this not happen to you again. If you notice, if I subjected you to a hypnosis process in which you forgot everything you suffered, you would be missing one of the most important parts of a dissociation process, which is precisely the process of self-awareness, which allows you to activate your psychic defenses. After all, experience is very important when it comes to making decisions that lead us to the success and happiness we seek in the future. If we go to the case that I mentioned at the beginning, I can tell you that thanks to this process of self awareness, my client realized that he could not force someone to love him no matter how enthusiastic he was about that person. So, thanks to all this, he was very careful not to enter into a relationship with someone who did not show the same interest that he showed in that person. And that is why he was so successful in his next relationship. Because in addition to stopping being obsessed with his previous partner, he looked for a new girlfriend based on first knowing if the other person showed the same interest in him that he showed in her. It's a mistake he was not going to make again. That's what he told me when we did the control session. So, we are going to build this process of self awareness in your psyche through the neurosubliminal questions that I am going to subject you to here. First of all, I want you to think about the following. Why do you think that in the past you looked for a partner who would hurt you? What do you think is better for you? Being in a relationship where things flow or where everything seems forced? If I ask you this question, it is because I am sure that throughout your life, most of the relationships you entered into did not happen naturally, but because one of the two of you forced the other person to be with him or with her. And therefore, the next thing I want you to think is about what degree of forcing do you think you faced in that relationship. You can number it as we have been doing up to this point. Being 1, I did not force this person at all, or this person did not force me at all. Being 10, I forced that person or that person forced me. Based on this, the next question that arises is why you think you were forced into that relationship. What problem were you experiencing when you generated that bond with that person from whom you want to dissociate? You felt alone, you wanted to hurt someone else, you wanted to recover your personal value. The possibilities are endless. The only thing I want you to be aware of here is the fact that, contrary to what you believed, it was not a natural process that you experienced when you decided to be with someone who ended up harming you. Only once you do this, you can accept that the relationship should not have happened, which in turn will allow you to avoid entering into forced relationships in the future, which is what we are looking for here. Once we have taken these first steps of self-awareness, the next thing I want you to think about is how do you think that bad relationship could make you better? If you notice, here I am presenting you with a paradox. but let me give you an example so you can understand where I am going with this question. Years ago, I had a client who used to be hit by his partner, a traumatic experience, as you can understand. But thanks to this person realized why he allowed his partner at the time to hit him. This had to do with the treatment he had received from his mother, who every time he made a mistake, she slapped at him. The same ones he received from his girlfriend at the time. If you look to the toxic girlfriend of that time, he was projecting the relationship he had with her mother, who made him feel guilty for all the problems that she as a woman had faced for having him as her son. When doing this process of self-awareness, he realized that the relationship he had with his mother had nothing to do with the relationship he had with his partner. He evolved, and therefore he managed to ensure that no woman ever hit him again, because he overcome that trauma that he came with. Therefore, I ask you a question again. Given everything bad thing you faced with that partner, what would you say is what has allowed you to evolve the most, thanks to that bad relationship? From there, the next thing I want you to think about is how you think this bad experience is going to help you avoid those problems that you experienced during the time you were with that person. In the case I just told you about, my client at the time realized that he couldn't choose very dominant women again. And as soon as a certain degree of violence arose from the person he was dating, he would walk away. He didn't bother arguing with that person anymore. If you notice, by becoming aware of how bad we suffer, we can use that knowledge to our advantage. Therefore, by seeing our previous relationships with greater objectivity, we are gaining a great source of knowledge, which will allow us to achieve that emotional happiness that we are looking for so much. But in our next relationship, because we will know how to choose a partner with greater judgment. Based on that, now I want you to think about how this bad experience is going to help you to transform into who you really want to be. Clearly, if you were in a toxic relationship, you suffered because that person limited your true self. You were not who you wanted to be with that person. Well, the idea here is to induce that state of thought. If you were in a new relationship, what kind of person would you like to be? This is very important because in all the cases I have worked on up to this point, for cases of dissociation, I tell my clients that they must project the type of person they really want to be with their new partner. If that person doesn't allow you to be the way you want to be, it's clear that the relationship is not going to work. Of course, everything must be in balance. This does not mean that you test your potential partner to see if they will accept every aspect of your life. Rather, it is about being able to define an ego state of yours with which you feel most comfortable in a relationship. We are going to work on all of this in the therapy related to strengthening the self-state. But if you look closely, thanks to this, you can already visualize how you want to be when you enter a new relationship. And finally, I want you to think about how to live without becoming dependent on someone, which is one of the biggest risks you expose yourself to when you enter a relationship. Why do you think you became dependent on your previous relationships, and how do you think you could not prevent this from happening? Emotional dependence is a complex of the unconscious and is usually treated more effectively within the framework of a psychoanalytic therapy which is the second part of this type of procedure. For now, the only thing I want you to do is think, induce, and reflect on these things. Because as I indicated, this is a neurosubliminal process through which I am restructuring your mind and your psyche without you realizing it. I am operating in the unconscious, which is part of good psychoanalytic therapy. In the next section, we are going to work on the DF technique, which is the best technique that exists so that you can avoid relapse of any emotional state that makes you want to get out of this dissociative process that I have induced in you throughout this treatment. See you there!